Today, we're gonna talk about strength and weakness. Because over the past couple years, God has given me a master class on strength and weakness. And I'm gonna tell you about that journey and how I got to where I'm at here and what God has been teaching me. And I wanna give that to you all as well. So here's how it started. A couple years ago, out of nowhere, I had a seizure. I go to see my doctor. He sends me to a neurologist. Neurologist sends me in to get an MRI. And then a couple weeks after that, Sunday, just preached, got off stage, and I get a call from a neurosurgeon. Sunday afternoon. And he said, Jay, I'm sitting at home. I'm looking at your scan on my screen, and I needed to call you because I need you to come in first thing on Monday. We need to talk about this. I'm like, what's going on? He said, well, I'm looking at the scan, and you have about a golf ball-sized tumor in the center of your brain. And we need to do some tests to find out if this is benign or malignant, and so just come in first thing. And so, of course, I did. I came in the first thing. The next morning, my wife, Natalie, was with me, and he told me, he said, look, this type of tumor that you have, this isn't like a cyst that's growing on your brain. This is tumor that's infected brain tissue. And so we're gonna need to cut out a golf ball-sized portion of your brain. But before we do that, we need to test to see what we're dealing with, to see if this is even cancerous or not, because maybe we could just leave it in there. All that to say, he said, let's do the test. We'll have you come back in a couple weeks. So a couple weeks pass, and you know what weeks like that are like, right? Oh gosh. Those are hard weeks. But a couple weeks pass, and we go back into the office, and I'm sitting next to my wife, Natalie, and the doctor says to us the three words you never want to hear. You have cancer. And then it gets worse. He says, there's no cure. This is terminal. And he gave me a horrendous prognosis, so scary, so devastating. My wife broke down crying. I put my hand on her knee to comfort her and to brace myself for the fight of a life. I needed to fight for my life. We left, we went home, we went up to our bedroom. My daughter was down in the living room, and my wife just fell into me, collapsed into my chest, and we just crumbled onto the bed. We were one, we were with each other, we were for each other, we were gonna face this together, but if there was any other path to walk in this world, Lord, please, anything. If you got that news, what would you do? I'll tell you what I did. I went to Dunkin' Donuts. I went to Dunkin' Donuts because I needed to get myself a maple bar, drown the sorrows with maple bar. You know what I'm talking about. You know, Dunkin' Donuts maple bars are the best. They're not even that good, but they were on the way to my daughter's school. I dropped her off, went through the drive-thru, got my maple bar, sat in the parking lot, and then I got serious. Then I said to God in a very straightforward, direct prayer, God, what are you doing? And then he answered. Not in an audible voice, but just like Jesus promised, through the Holy Spirit, he would remind us of the teachings of Jesus. And the Holy Spirit took my mind to 2 Corinthians chapter 12. Here's the backstory. The Apostle Paul, he's a church planter. I was a young church planter just a couple years ago. I was planting a church. And Paul, he's planting churches all over the place. And then he develops what he calls a thorn in his side. Now, it's mysterious. He doesn't tell us what that is. A lot of scholars believe that it was some kind of illness, some kind of sickness. And then Paul says that he prayed 3 times for the Lord to remove it. Now, when someone in this culture says they prayed something 3 times, the number 3 always stands for completeness. So basically what Paul is saying is, I prayed it through and through. I prayed it until there was nothing left to pray about. I prayed and prayed and prayed and prayed. And at this point, after weeks of waiting, after getting terrible news, I had prayed and prayed and prayed and prayed and prayed. Now, the answer that Paul got after praying 3 times, the answer he received to his prayer was no. But then Jesus enlightened his soul to know. Jesus said, my grace is sufficient. My power is perfected in weakness. And then 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 10, this is how Paul concludes. This is what he gets from all of this. He's like, okay, if your power is perfected in weakness, if your grace is gonna be sufficient. He says this in verse 10. Okay, then for when I'm weak, then I'm strong. I'm gonna be okay. For when I'm weak, then I'm strong. And that scripture has become so, so precious to my heart, to my soul, to my life. For when I'm weak, then I'm strong. I hate when I'm weak. Is anybody out there with me? Do you just hate feeling weak? For me, I hate feeling weak because I'm afraid of failing. I'm afraid of being needy, being a burden, being repulsive. I'm afraid of these things, and so I don't ever want to be weak. And when the Lord brought me to this scripture, man, I so didn't want to be weak because I knew my daughter was going to be watching. I knew that as I was going to battle this illness and I was going to be so weak, my daughter would be watching me. And there's something about being a father, I don't want my daughter to see me weak. I want her to look at me as a pillar of strength. But I knew that she was gonna see me go through brain surgery. She was gonna be bedside with me. I knew she was gonna see me go through radiation and chemotherapy. And I wanted to shield her from seeing me. But what this verse tells me is when I'm weak, I'm actually strong. And I needed that. I needed this seemingly impossible, contradictory statement. I needed it to be true, and I still need it to be true. I needed this paradoxical oxymoron to be applied to my life. I needed to know that when I'm weak, I'm actually strong, because then I could draw close to my daughter. I could be vulnerable with my wife. I could have deep connections to the people that I needed to have deep connections with. And it's not until you can rely on the truth that we are strong when we are weak, then you have the courage and the confidence to do the impossible. Now this verse has become so dear to me, I wanna dig in a little deeper with you. Okay, so the two opposing words here, weak, strong, right? So if you dig into the Greek of that, weak is astheneo. That's the best I can give you. But it's really simple. It just means weak. Physically weak. That's it. But the word for strong is dynatos. Dynatos. It's a good word, isn't it? Dynatos. I just said toast. I meant dynatos. Dynatos. And every time I say it, I want to say dynamite, because that's where we get the word from. And this does not just mean explosive strength. It means strength of the soul. And there is a truth that is happening here. That when God does a work deep within you, when he strengthens your soul, when he works in your spirit, then you're able to be strong in the world. But first, you have to be willing to admit that you're weak. It's not until you come to terms with how frail you are, how finite you are, how you don't have control over everything. Once you get to that point, then you're able to turn to Jesus and say, I need your strength. There's no other way to access it. So for when we are weak, then we are strong. So knowing this, I started driving home. Started driving home from Dunkin' Donuts back to my house, and this verse was just ministering to me. And I started to think about other words of Paul. In 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 10, he's talking about the power of Jesus. And he says that the same power that resurrected Jesus will resurrect us as well. And that resurrecting power lives within us. That word power, do you know what Greek word that is? Dynatos. It's the same word. So when Paul concludes, when I'm weak, then I'm dynatos, he's talking about resurrecting power. That is a power that can do the impossible. So with this fresh in my soul and on my mind, I get home, I get out of my car, and I say to God, how can I join you? I asked him at the donut shop, what are you doing? And then I had the courage to say, how can I join you? It's 2022. If this year you want to grow spiritually, if you want to become spiritually stronger, pray those two prayers. God, what are you doing? How can I join you? God, what are you doing? God, open up my spiritual eyes to see why, to see what, to see how you are moving. God, what are you doing? And how can I join you? I promise you, if you pray those two pivotal prayers, God is going to strengthen your soul, and he is going to grow you in 2022. That's what he did for me. I prayed that second prayer, how can I join you? And I wouldn't say that it was the voice of the Lord. It was just more like a nudge from the Holy Spirit. Out of nowhere, I got this idea. I had an idea to do Ironman while going through cancer treatment. I know, ridiculous, right? It just came out of nowhere. By the way, people assume that Ironman was on my bucket list. It was not. I've always known that Ironman is a sufferfest and nothing more. Why would I want to do that as a bucket list item? Now, okay, maybe some of you don't know what Ironman is. I didn't quite know either, so let me tell you. Ironman is a mega triathlon. Triathlons are swimming, biking, and running. This is like a ridiculous mega triathlon where what they do is you start swimming, you swim 2.4 miles, not 2.4 laps, 2.4 miles you swim, and then you get out of there, get on your bike, and you ride 112 miles. Then when you're done with that, if you're not tired yet, you just do a marathon to just cap the day off. So then you ride run 26.2 miles to finish off the day. So exactly, you do 140.6 miles in 17 hours or less. Crazy. Stupid. You wanna know what's even more stupid? To go, what if I do that while I'm going through cancer treatment? But I just had this sense that God wanted to teach me what true strength was, and I thought, here's a way to test it out. I don't know, maybe this is dumb, or maybe God's gonna teach me something through this. And here was the other test, to tell my wife about it. So I walked in and I said, honey, I'm thinking about doing Ironman while I go through treatment. She's like, what? I'm like, listen, I know like I'm about to go into a really weak time, and I know it's a huge obstacle that we're trying to get through, but I think there's opportunity there. You know, honey, when I was 10 years old, I watched Ironman for the first time and only time. It was on Wide World of Sports. I watched these guys racing, and I thought to myself, that's impossible. These people are superhuman. What if Hero, that's my daughter's name, what if Hero, instead of watching this on TV someday, what if she could see her dad cross the finish line? What if I dedicated my race to Hero as a grand gesture of love and as a way to teach her what strong faith looked like, what resilient faith looked like? Every parent wants to teach their kid that they can fulfill their dreams, but not too often do you get the opportunity to show them what resilient faith looks like, and to show them that as they go after their dreams, things are gonna come up and they're gonna have to persevere through that. And I thought, here's an opportunity. And then my wife said yes. Uh-oh, now this is real, right? So I tell Hero, hey, I'm gonna do Ironman. I'm dedicating my race to you. And then I went in for 2 brain surgeries. Now my brain tumor was right in the center of my brain, and this was really scary because the center of your brain, it's called the eloquent cortex. A bunch of surgeons said my tumor was inoperable because it was such a dangerous region, and I found a surgeon that was willing to take me on. And as they removed a golf ball portion of my brain, this is in the area that dealt with interpersonal relationships, your ability to control your emotions, your ability to recognize social cues, your filter. Could you imagine if you lost your filter? Like everything here just came out here. That was a risk for me. And then, of course, it wasn't guaranteed that the surgery would be successful and that I'd come out of it. So very, very scary surgery. But the Lord was with me, and the Lord was with my surgeon, and I came out, and it was 100% successful. Praise Jesus. Yeah, God is good. And a month later, when I was just strong enough to start radiation and chemotherapy, we went out to Florida to start treatment. On day 1 of radiation, I ran 1 mile. By the end of 5 weeks of radiation, I was running 20 miles. Then we left Houston, came back to Southern California, and I started swimming. I didn't know how to swim. I mean, I could stay above water, but I didn't know how to swim competitively. And so I swam on the first day we came home. We bumped up the chemotherapy. It's really intense now. And I swam 100 meters, and I was gassed. I thought, how am I going to do 3,800 meters if I can only do 100? But I kept working. A friend of mine that swam in college came and started to teach me. I worked. It was hard, but soon enough, I was swimming over 2 miles. It's like, whoa, this is crazy. Then I got on the bike. I saved that for last because I thought it was going to be the easiest part. Nope. The first day on the bike, I rode 10 miles, and then 10 became 20, 20 became 40, and then I hit a wall at 40. Back strains, all sorts of muscle strains from the chemotherapy, and it was so difficult to get past 40. I needed to be ready to go 112. I didn't know if I was going to be able to do it, but I kept pushing and I kept going, and pretty soon I was riding 100 miles at a time. I'm like, whoa. Okay, I really don't want to come across like I'm bragging in any way. You have to understand, I'm boasting in my weakness. I was so weak. I was pitiful. Compared to any other endurance athlete, I was struggling. They were growing and progressing so much quicker than I was. But I kept going. And here's how I did it. Every morning, when my alarm clock went off, I would say, God, give me strength. And then I put my feet on the ground and I let him do the rest. And I want to say to you, we're starting off a new year, and there's some of you that need to pray that exact thing. God, give me strength, and then you need to put your feet on the ground. You just need to put your feet on the ground, take that step of faith, and let him give you the strength to keep going. God did it for me over and over again, because not only did I have to do those 3 individual sports, I had to start combining them all together, which was a whole nother difficult level. And then all this training was going on in 2020. Do you guys know what historic event began in 2020? It's still going on today. Yeah, so pandemic is on the scene, which makes something that's hard nearly impossible because it puts so much stress on my family. I was doing this for my family, for my daughter, and now the stress was almost unmanageable. Before it was great. Drop my daughter off at school, my wife would go to work, and I would train. Be back in time to pick my daughter up. But now, everybody's at home. Peace, I'm out. 8 hours a day, I'm out training, leaving my wife and daughter at home. Anyway, all that to say, I thought about quitting. I thought, maybe this isn't worth it. But I told her I was doing this for her. I told my wife that I wanted her to see what resilient faith looked like. And now it was really, really tough. Now I'm dealing with seizures and strains and fatigue, stress of the family, and I'm just not sure if I can keep doing it. And then out of nowhere, it was really like a divine instrumental moment. I got connected with a coach, a triathlon coach, and she was in Boise, and it turned out that she was a breast cancer survivor. So she knew what it was like to be going through chemotherapy, and she was like a 6-time world champion Ironman competitor. So she knew how to compete on a high level, and she knew what it was like to be going through cancer. And so she came on board. She said, I'm gonna train you. I'm gonna get you there. Okay, let's go. So she started training me, and my race was starting to come up. I was scheduled to race in Australia. It got canceled. Then I transferred races to Northern California, canceled. All Ironman races across the nation were canceled. At this point, I was a sponsored Ironman athlete, and Ironman, I saw somebody go, whoa, it's not because of my speed, it's because of my story, right? They were inspired by my story. I'm not that kind of athlete, I promise you. So anyway, they called me and said, all all races are canceled, but we've never canceled the World Championships. We want you to race at the Kona World Champions. However, this is going to be the first time in history that we do it virtually. This is our first full distance Ironman VR race. He said, look, we want to do an athlete spotlight on you. We want to track you during your race and then to do a post-race interview. It's going to be awesome. Are you on board? And I'm like, what's the catch? Yeah, well, no catch. I mean, you just have to plan the race yourself. I was like, I've never been in an Ironman before. I don't know how all this works. And now I've got to design 140 miles of racing. I've got to build aid stations, staff aid stations. I've got to do all of the permits that are required. I got to do that. And they're like, yeah, no big deal. I was like, this seems like too much. And then I went and talked to my wife, who's under a ton of stress. Full-time professor, taking care of heroes. It's too much. And I said, hey, this is what's going on. And she said, I think there's an opportunity here. I'm like, what? She's like, yeah, it was sweet that you wanted to take the family to Australia, but that was a bad idea. She said, how much greater will it be to have the support of your community here? Church members, family members, friends, they can come support you here. And then she said, and if you get to design the course, what stops you from putting the finish line right at our house? And when she said that, the metaphor just melted my heart. To be racing to get home to my wife and my daughter, to be giving everything that I have to get home, I thought, yeah, let's do it. So I called Ironman, I said, we're in. And next thing you know, race day is there. 4:30 in the morning, my alarm clock goes off, and I pray the same thing I always pray. Lord, give me strength. I put my feet on the ground. I get up, I double check all my nutrition, my gear, and I head out to the Pacific Ocean, down to Newport Beach. Get there, there's about 100 friends sitting there in the dark. A friend of mine flew out from Arizona to lead the opening ceremony. Mr. Brian Rozelle was there as well, and he kept yelling, Ukaipa, through the whole thing. I was like, who is this guy? It was Brian. And friends prayed for me, and then I took my mark on the starting line, and all my friends came around me. My wife and daughter had a bullhorn, and they all counted down, 3, 2, 1, sound the horn. I take off down for the Pacific Ocean. I jump into the water. It's freezing, invigorating, wakes me right up, and I start swimming. My pace is good, I'm feeling good, and the sun is starting to come up. And as the sun comes up, I'm swimming alongside of a pier, and I see all of these friends, all these family members, and they've got these big flags that say Iron Dad on them. They started calling me Iron Dad, whatever. So they're waving these big flags, and as I'm swimming, I look up, and I'm just seeing this all happen, and then I see my daughter. And she locks eyes with me. She knows I see her. I know that she sees me. And she smiles and she waves. And I was just at this perfect point in my stroke where I waved back. And she starts jumping up and down, all gleeful. I can hear the giddiness. And I start swimming. And I learn that the strength of the Lord, or the joy of the Lord, is our strength. I'm just so invigorated. So I'm flying. And then about a mile into the swim, I'm meditating on the Lord's Prayer, and he provides a different kind of strength for me. He gives me the strength to forgive. As I'm meditating on the Lord's Prayer, I'm thinking about people from my past that had deeply wounded me, and I was able to forgive in a manner that I'd never been able to forgive before. I had tried as a follower of Jesus to forgive these people. But have you ever been there where like you're trying to forgive, but there's just emotions that are stuck there? But something happened in the water as I was communing with the Lord where I found the strength to forgive. And at 2.5 miles, I came out of the water like a new man, like I just came out of the waters of baptism. And I ran to the transition zone, put on my bike gear, got on my bike, and I headed out. The sun was now rising, and I was riding up PCH. PCH at 70 degrees with the sun just starting to rise. Oh my gosh, so beautiful. PCH is always rated in the top 10 of cycling routes in the world. People fly from all over to ride this route, and that is my Ironman route. So I'm riding up PCH, and very soon into the ride, 2 police motorcycles pull up next to me. Now, mind you, I've got an Ironman film crew and a chase vehicle And I'm wondering, did anybody get permits for this? Uh-oh. And they look at me, and then they just take off. It's like, okay, cool. And then as I get close to the first intersection, I see they shut down the intersection so that we could just blow right through. Every intersection, they shut it down. So I basically had a police escort, like it was like Tour de France or something. And it was so awesome. And again, I was smiling for miles. It was just so good. And I headed inland to Yorba Linda, where our church is. And as I head towards Yorba Linda, I'm just thinking, this is awesome. I've never felt this good on a training ride, on a training day. I feel really good. And so I get to the transition zone for the run, for the marathon, and I'm 3 hours ahead of schedule, and my church family's there, my family's there, and I get off the bike, and I'm feeling good. I put on my shoes, and I take off for my run. Now, I had scheduled to run at a pace of 9.5-minute miles, and as I'm running, I'm feeling good. I look down, and I'm doing 8-minute miles. And I think to myself, slow down, Jay. This is a marathon, not a sprint, literally, right? So I'm like, okay, let's back off. And so I do. I back off for the next mile. And at this point, now I look down, and I'm doing 8.5-minute miles. And I'm like, man, okay, I'm feeling really good. And I think to myself, maybe I'm just gonna crush my time. Maybe this is like, I'm gonna find out what it means, for the Lord to be my strength, because I'm just gonna be an animal out there. I think this could be good. And then it happened. 2 miles into, I knew that I wasn't just competing against myself. I knew I was competing against the cancer. I knew the treatment was gonna come into play. I didn't know how. I didn't know if I was gonna have a seizure along the route. I didn't know if I was gonna have a back strain or muscle cramps. I had no idea. But what I didn't anticipate is that it was gonna be a gut problem. Here's what happened. For 120 miles up until this point, I was taking in nutrition and hydration. And during that time, my stomach was pretty well stationary. Whether you're swimming or you're cycling, your stomach stays in one place. But then as I started running, your stomach starts to jostle a bit, right? And that's when I realized all of that hydration and nutrition was not getting absorbed through my gut lining. And that was a problem. I'm gonna spare you the details, but it was a problem. And it was a bigger problem because I knew I wasn't gonna be able to take a drink of water for the rest of this marathon. Now, for a healthy body, to try and complete a marathon without a drink of water, it's not gonna happen. For a body riddled with cancer, going through chemo, there's no way. I knew my race is over. I didn't know when, but I knew at some point I was gonna cramp up. I'd seen the highlight videos. Ironman prides themselves on putting together highlight videos of people cramping and crawling, trying to make it across the finish line. Professional athletes cramp up and crawl across the finish line. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm still 20 miles away from the finish line. You can't crawl 20 miles. No matter how much you want to make it, if you are that way, there are some things, some limitations that you have. And I knew my race is done. And then the Lord taught me something. There's strength in the attempt. There's strength in the attempt. And so at that moment, I made peace with my circumstances, and I changed my mantra. I changed my mantra to this: you have nothing to prove, just an example to set. Nothing to prove, just an example to set. Even though my daughter might not see me cross the finish line, I wanted to be able to look her in the eye and tell her, I gave it my all. I gave everything that I had to make it back home to you and Mom. That was so important to me, and so I just kept repeating that over and over. I've got nothing to prove, just an example to set. And I kept pressing on. The next 10 miles, are some of the most horrendous miles I've ever ran in my entire life. And 10 miles into it, another 10 to go, my coach, who had flown out from Idaho, had got word that I was not doing well. She tracked me down using my GPS watch, and she met me at the next aid station. And she had brought her running shoes. She put her shoes on, and she started running next to me. She started troubleshooting with me. She tried to figure out, why is this happening to my body? And as a veteran world champion Ironman, she was able to solve the problem for me. She said, listen, put these salt tablets just right under your tongue. It'll go right into your blood system. It'll balance things out. And she was right. Within a mile of doing that, I could feel my body start absorbing the nutrients. And I knew I had a shot of actually finishing this race. My coach saved my race. And so I ask you, I pause in the story to ask you, who is running with you? There is no way you're going to finish the marathon of faith without a community of people running with you. Run the race, fight the good fight, receive the prize by doing it in the community of the saints. You need people running beside you, and you need to bear the burdens of others around you. That's what the church is. And so she ran with me for a mile. I started to feel the nutrients absorb, and I thought, maybe. The sun went down. It's a trip to race when it starts dark. Sun comes up, sun goes down, and you still got a few miles to go. And so I'm going, and then a squad car pulls up behind me. Well, by this time, I kind of know what's going on. So they start doing their lights, and over the loudspeaker, they say, come on, Iron Man. Keep on going, you got this, you got this. And then they started playing AC/DC over the loudspeaker. and so I'm running. And then I get to my neighborhood, and I turn into my neighborhood, and I see it's not just one squad car now. There's 5 squad cars behind me. And I can hear the cars, but I can also see and hear the party that's in front of my house. I can see the lights, I can hear the music, and I can hear my friends laughing. And I start heading towards home. And as I turn around the final turn, both sides of the street are just lined with friends. I've got a passageway of support that I get to run through. And as I run through it, they're cheering for me, they're yelling, and they're also falling in behind me, running me in. And as I get closer, I see the finishing structure, and I see the Ironman finishing tape, and behind the finishing tape is my wife and my daughter, and they're holding a sign that says, there's no place like the finish line. And once I saw that, I floated down the street. I just floated to them. I crossed the finish line, and I made it. I made it finally by the grace and the strength of the Lord. I made it across. I kissed my wife. And then I got down on one knee, and I said to my daughter, if I can do it, you can do it. If I can do it, you can do it, honey. The Lord is gonna put dreams in your heart. And don't be surprised when life knocks you down, but you hold on to the hope of Jesus. You get up in the strength of Christ, stay strong and press on, and you can do anything, my daughter, I promise you. And now, after saying that to her at the finish line, I get to stand on this stage and say the exact same thing to you. If I can do it, you can do it. God has put a calling on your life, and he has called you to walk worthy of that calling, and he is gonna give you all the strength that is necessary, because he who has begun a good work in you will finish it, will bring it to completion. By the strength of his resurrecting spirit that is inside of you, there is nothing that can stop you, because our God delights in lending us his strength. He has got the power to move mountains or to give you the strength to climb them. And that is why in Philippians chapter 4, verse 13, we can say, I can do all things through him who strengthens me. I can do all things through him who strengthens me. So when life hits you hard and knocks you down, hold on to the hope of Jesus. Get up, stay strong, and press on. Because there's always something. There's always something. And I promise you this, in every obstacle, there's an opportunity. Just as God can transform our weakness into strength, he transforms our obstacles into opportunities. And the glory goes to him. Listen, you are weaker than you dare admit. But once you're willing to admit it, you're stronger than you could ever imagine, because Christ is strength. So my friends, going into 2022, stay strong and press on. Thanks for having me. Love you, love your church.
Down a life dedicated to love, resilience, faith, and true strength. Love. Dear one, I will show you how to cherish and sacrificially serve those you love. Expect the same in return. Resilience. Courageous child, I will always have your back as you do hard things. Hold on to hope, faith. Treasured soul, I will walk worthy of my spiritual calling without veering. Follow me and find truth. Strength. Young hero, I will press on and give everything I have for you. Carry the fire, fan the flame, use your might to lift others up. I'm not superhuman. I'm weak, but I'm strong.